Great.
Great.
Ready
Thanks
to
for
go.
joining us, everyone. Yeah. Hi, Silje. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited to talk about some negative online reviews and what we can
Yeah,
do about it.
same. So my name's Rebecca Wood, and I'm a practice leader in our disputes team here at LegalVision.
And my name is Silje Andersen-Cooke, and I'm a lawyer in Rebecca's team, the disputes team as well.
Yeah, we thought this webinar might be a good idea because we deal with quite a lot of clients who encounter issues in terms of negative online reviews and how that can impact on their businesses. So, I mean, as we know, most businesses generally rely on online reviews to promote their products and services. And in fact, while I was researching for this webinar, I came across a paper that was published by Deloitte that indicated that generally their research indicated that consumers are way more comfortable searching online and then relying on reviews as a first step in determining whether or not to engage with a business
That's so true.
for their products and services. And I think we could all only imagine that just given COVID and lockdown and the amount of online shopping that everyone's doing at the moment, that can only have become more embedded in our consumer habits.
Exactly.
And certainly that the importance of online reviews is just only going to increase. I did read something to suggest that apparently 90% of all consumers are engaging with online reviews before they actually connect with a business. So, I mean, what does this all tell us? What we know, online reviews are really important, and that online reputation is really important. So, you know, many of our clients are coming to us, they've received a negative review online and really concerned about how that can impact upon their business. So the webinar is almost kind of like the advice that we give to our clients, which is essentially, well, step one is let's explore our non-legal options. You know, consider whether or not you've got a claim. If there's a claim, it might be in defamation or injurious falsehood. What steps should we undertake before commencing a legal proceeding? And we're also going to talk about in this seminar, look, what do you do if that review is anonymous?
Yeah, exactly. And then after that, we'll have some time to answer some of your questions. And I believe you can start putting them in the chat now if you've got any on the top of your head. And then we'll also be announcing a little special offer for all of you guys who have joined the webinar today.
Great. Well, let's get into it.
Yeah.
Negative online reviews. So when do they become an issue? Look, it's really unlikely that all businesses can avoid a negative online review altogether. Negative reviews happen, and no business can expect their customers to be 100% happy all the time. However, it's when a review is completely false or exaggerated or particularly damaging to a reputation that it can become a real legal problem.
Exactly. And it's really important to note as well that if a review is negative, but it's true, you actually won't have a cause of action against that reviewer. And the ACCC has actually mentioned this, that if you were to remove reviews only because they were negative, this could actually be considered misleading and deceptive conduct. So it's really important, we want it to flag up front that you should only consider that you have a cause of action against reviews that are negative, but also untrue and false.
And that's because I guess the ACCC is interested in making sure that companies are not engaging in misleading and deceptive conduct. And so eliminating all negative reviews is creating a really unbalanced approach to the reputation or services provided by that business. But if that comment is, you know, it rises above the comment like, look, I had a really bad experience with this. I ordered something and it arrived 4 weeks late because it got lost in the mail and they didn't give me a refund. If it's something a bit more damaging than that, then, you know, generally the best way that a business can respond is just reaching out to that reviewer directly. Engage, understand, use it as a learning opportunity. And perhaps often you might be able to reach some compromise with this particular customer. And maybe if that customer feels that their concerns have been addressed, you might be actually able to get them just to agree to remove the review. Alternatively, what you might want to do is engage, perhaps not directly, but online, so everyone else can see how as a company have responded to that particular review. First advice, don't agitate the issue. Don't try and make the problem worse by engaging in an online fight. Acknowledge the review, just perhaps provide some context to that particular experience. And you just want to, I guess, give enough to understanding to your consumers as to how you as a business deals with negative reviews, because I think that can say quite a lot about a business as well, and show that you're open to taking that feedback on board, learning from it, and perhaps changing processes in the future. And then just by doing that, you provide a really balanced view of that particular negative experience or review. If engaging with that particular reviewer doesn't help, things get worse, well, that's when we might want to think about what next steps could you take? Yeah,
I totally agree. I think the best first step is trying to resolve it with that reviewer. If that's not going to work, you might consider reporting the review to the platform or the page administrator or wherever the review is published, and making a report and seeing if they will be able to remove it because of the nature of the review. It might breach their terms and conditions, for example. If the review is particularly damaging, and especially if the reviewer is anonymous, there are other platforms that you might consider that require payment, for example, to remove these kinds of reviews. One example is Removify. I'm not sure about their success rate, but they are another sort of non-legal option that might be worth looking into should the first and second options not work out, basically.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that's advice that I've given to some of my clients, and they've been able to go away and resolve the issues without actually having to spend any money on lawyers. So it's a really good option.
Exactly. And especially if you're getting lots of reviews and constantly, you definitely want to consider some more cost-effective ways of resolving those things.
Yeah. The other thing is also to promote good reviews as well. So sometimes if the negative reviews are really outweighed by positive reviews, then that provides a really balanced view as to perhaps the weight that a potential customer might give to that negative review. So we've sort of gone through those non-legal options. I guess let's turn to what perhaps your legal options might be. And firstly, well, you might want to consider, is this review actually defamatory? Do I have a claim in defamation? So, what is defamation? Well, defamation is a right of action that is concerned with protection of reputation. It's a cause of action that's governed by both the common law and legislation. So, in short, a defamation act occurs when there's a publication in the online sense. It's a post on social media, a review on a particular client's or business's website that's really causes harm to the reputation. So it's a bit more than just saying I've had a negative experience. It's actually something that could result in, potential customers diverting their business elsewhere. It's important to note that a business that can be defamed only if it has less than 10 employees. So it's really aimed at small business protections. There are certain elements that you need to be able to demonstrate to be able to prove that defamation has occurred. So you need to be able to identify the particular publication and that it was available to the public at large. Now, generally when they're online comments, that's pretty much quite a simple threshold to demonstrate. That the reviewer has to specifically identify your business or an employee of your business, and it has to hurt your business reputation in some way. Now, there's a few different also thresholds that I think we need to talk about, like serious harm. It has to cause serious harm, and maybe Silje, you could just elaborate on that for us.
Yeah, so that's quite a new thing that's been introduced recently with the new updates to the Defamation Act. So, but previously, serious harm wasn't a part of the defamation definition, essentially. Now it is part of that. So you need to be able to meet this threshold of serious harm, which basically means that the defamatory material has to cause some sort of serious harm to you or your business that you need to be able to prove to the court, essentially. So whether it's reputational harm, mental anguish, or economic damage, there are some different ways that you can meet that threshold of serious harm. But it's important to note that that's now been introduced, so the threshold has been raised, which is really interesting. And also what was introduced were some new defences and things as well. And we'll talk about that a bit later on as well.
Okay. So once we've established that perhaps an act of defamation has occurred, then the next step is to consider whether or not we should be proceeding to court or making a proper claim. Might just click over to the next slide here.
Yeah, so the first step is a concerns notice or an offer to make amends.
That's right. So the Defamation Act requires that before a party goes to court, they have to actually issue a concerns notice. So a concerns notice, generally in the form of a letter or an email, some formal correspondence, would be sent that would have to identify the particular defamation, defamatory material, so that's the particular post, where it was published, and what outcomes you seek. And in terms of the outcomes, it's formally known as an offer to make amends. So it's really, well, what do you want to get out? You know, how can we make it good? So it might be, you know, and that first concerns notice is more focused at addressing the actual defamatory publication. So the outcomes that you might be seeking is a retraction, an apology. You might want that person to say, look, I've made a huge mistake. I was totally wrong. And I made this post and I shouldn't. You might want them to, you know, issue a retraction, give an undertaking that they're never going to do it again. And I guess in terms of more serious defamatory claims, you know, there might be a payment in terms of your legal costs that you might have had to incur as a result of the concerns notice.
Definitely. And I find that a lot of our clients, what they're really concerned about is mostly just getting the review removed. So that's
right.
Primary number one, what you would put in your offer to make amends, and often we do get a response to that quite quickly. We have in the past, and it can be very effective in achieving that outcome without having to spend, you know, thousands of dollars to try and prosecute the case in court, for example.
Right, and I think it's still because a lot of people just make comments. You know, we've had quite a few instances where people have made really negative and defamatory posts on social media, like Facebook groups. An example was, you know, a restaurant owner, and someone posted on Facebook a really bad, a really negative, and probably quite an unreasonable review of that restaurant. And I think probably a lot of people don't even really pay attention to the fact that businesses are watching, or really think about the impact that their post might make. And so just that legal threat, the concerns notice, cannot generally be enough to correct the record.
That's right. They really don't think that what they're doing is illegal, or, you know, that it could be captured by defamation. And so when you sort of send this concerns notice, they can be quite shocked and react, you know, in the way that you want them to, just remove the review and be apologetic. And especially once you bring to their attention the amount of harm that's caused as well to you or your business, I think that's really, can be really effective in you know, provoking some empathy in the reviewer as well, I think.
Yeah, agreed. So and so what's next?
And after that, exactly. Let's say, you know, that's best case scenario, and we love talking about best case scenario, but worst case scenario, you don't get the result you want from a response to a concerns notice and the offer of amends isn't accepted. What do you do next? You might want to think about whether going to court is an option.
That's right. You know, court's an option, but you know, it should be kind of a last resort, and that's because you know, litigation is both really costly but time consuming, and it can be a real substantial diversion from a business's main core objectives. And so that's why we would really only recommend that in the case of quite a serious defamatory statement that's got a real substantial caused a real substantial loss to a business.
Absolutely.
And that might be the fact that since a particular post has been made, there's an obvious drop off in client engagement or revenue. So there's a real measure by which we could assess a claim for compensation, essentially.
Exactly.
So we always recommend those non-legal options. Negotiations be exhausted before commencing court action as a last resort.
Exactly. And it's really interesting because there has been some recent cases about online reviews where they have been successful in court. And I had a look at those just recently. There was the Adelaide lawyer, I think Gordon Cheng was his name, who won $750,000 over a bad on Google review, which I find really interesting. And the way that he managed to get those damages was because he proved this loss of income between a period of time that the review remained up on the internet, and that they estimated that there was a substantial damage to the business, and they were able to put numbers to this. A specialist dentist also won recently in Victoria in relation to a 1-star Google review, like $170,000, which probably included costs. So there are examples out there of different individuals and businesses who have been defamed by online reviews and have won in court and received large kind of sums of damages. But the key thing is, as Rebecca said, you have to be able to claim some sort of economic loss. You need to show that, people made cancellations, there was a decline in bookings, things like that. And that can be quite tricky. So something to think about as well and consider.
Yeah. So the amount of damages that a court will award has to be, based on the harm to that reputation. Sorry.
Yeah.
You're not going to get damages for hurt feelings. It needs to be a real loss to your business that you need to be able to substantiate. But in terms of considering whether or not to go to court, we need to consider whether or not there's a defence to a claim that you might be able to bring. And there's quite a few defences. Yeah.
There's so many defences. And we won't go through all of them because it'll take too much time. But I think we wanted to pull out just two that we thought were relevant just to online reviews, for example. So the first being the defense of truth, which might seem like an obvious one. But basically, if the reviewer could prove that the material published was substantially true, then they would be able to rely on this truth defense as a complete defense. So this means that even if the court finds the review to be defamatory, the reviewer will not be held liable if they prove that in the statement, the review is true in substance and not materially different from the truth. So that means that essentially if they can prove that, it's close to the truth or, substantially close to the truth or not materially different, they may be able to get over the line and use that as a defense to defamation. The other defense that would likely be relevant is honest opinion. So honest opinion would apply if the review that you allege is defamatory if the review is their honest opinion, it's considered to be in the public interest and it's based on proper materials. So that's material that's both real and true. And we have a little example there, like if you actually go to a restaurant, you eat the meal, the butter chicken or whatever you're having, and your review is based on what you actually did, and you say that it's your honest opinion, you're not expressing a statement of fact. That's the key difference. They have to be able to prove that they genuinely tried the product or service and then published a review where they express their opinion about it. So it might, I don't know, I think it's a complex defense in a way, but I think it'd be most relevant to reviews, especially if they've actually had an experience with your service or product. This obviously doesn't apply if they've never even been to your business, never tried your service, and they've just made up a review. That's what they're trying to exclude. So
that's right.
The next topic.
Yeah, and I guess just drawing on what you were saying about that there's an element of falsity in those allegations, I guess brings us to talking about a claim for injurious falsehood. And that's another type of claim that a company might consider. Now, this is a claim where perhaps your business has received an online review that's actually part of a strategy to damage your business reputation. It's not simply perhaps just a consumer that's had a negative experience. It's something more than just the defamatory statements that we've been talking about. There's an element that the review is malicious in its intention. Now, an injurious falsehood claim can be made by a company that's got more than 10 employees. So again, this is sort of, I guess, defamation's available to smaller businesses, and an injurious falsehood is a claim that's available to larger businesses, 10 employees plus. And that the essential element of that claim is just what I said earlier. It's the intention of malice, and the intention that it is made, that review actually has been made with the intention of undermining, and causing real reputational damage and loss.
That's right. Yeah, and a key difference between defamation and injurious falsehood is that with defamation, the court assumes that the words of the review, for example, are false and malicious, and it's actually on the reviewer to use truth as a defense. Whereas with injurious falsehood, it's the complete opposite. So the reviewer is presumed to be acting honestly and without malice, and it's actually on you or the business or the person who's affected by the review to prove that they to prove that they had a malicious intent. So maliciousness, what does that involve? It involves a clear intention to inflict damage upon the person or the business. So, for example, if you can prove that they knew that the statement they made was completely false, or that they were reckless to the truth and have this intention to injure your business, those sorts of things go to malice. Something interesting as well to think about is that if they could prove that they honestly believe in the truth of their statement, this could be used as a defense to malice, similar to defamation, the truth defense.
So the process of pursuing an injurious falsehood claim is very similar to just a defamation claim. Sometimes you might even set out a claim for both. It is firstly sending that concerns notice, so putting them on notice that you're aware of the publication, and making that offer to amend. So it's retract, apologize, undertake to never do it again. And then if that has not been sufficient to resolve a particular issue, then it's commencing legal proceedings, to prevent that malicious campaign from continuing is the next best step.
Exactly.
But Celia, why don't you talk about, let's talk about how we deal with anonymous reviews.
Yeah, now I think this comes up a lot because it's the internet, and especially if you're going to be saying something controversial or really negative, it's likely that they're going to use a pseudonym or try and be anonymous online to be able to publish these kinds of reviews, and they're just the hardest, and it's really frustrating when people do that, because it's difficult to know whether or not they actually used your service and whether or not you can resolve it in the same ways that we were talking about before. So some ways that you can still take legal action against reviewers, even if they're anonymous, the ways that we've actually dealt with it, first and the cheapest option, I think, is getting an online investigator. So an online investigator can, if they've got a Google, for example, profile, but they're not using their real name, they can use online investigation techniques to be able to uncover their identity, or at least some elements of their identity, so that you can piece together who they might be and, commence a claim against them. If that's unsuccessful, and we have had some success with that, so that's always a good thing to try first. If that's unsuccessful, then another option would be preliminary discovery. This is quite an expensive option. Basically involves an application to the court to force the platform to reveal the reviewer's identity, because platforms like Apple, Google, Facebook, they've obviously got privacy policies in place, which is a good thing. So they don't reveal people's anonymous identity unless there's a court order. In most cases, there is success with preliminary discovery in forcing them to reveal the identity. And there's lots of different cases that we could provide as examples to that. So that is one option, but it's expensive, basically. Then there's an option potentially to take action against the page owner or the platform. And there's some recent cases that might show in certain circumstances that you could take action against the page owner or the platform owner in very specific circumstances as well. So that might be another option if you can't reveal the identity of them.
And that's right. And I think because a publisher can now be, I guess, liable for defamatory comments on their websites, that there may be, I guess, a more, they may be more willing to engage and remove reviews when they're unjustified and false, because they want to avoid liability themselves. And in fact, you know, just last week, I was able to assist a client in just writing to the platform owner directly, is setting out the backstory as to what led to this particular complaint, and they were willing to remove it because we were actually able to provide some context.
Exactly.
And also, you know, showed that perhaps there might have been justification for them, you know, to make sure that that was not on their platform. So, you know, some really good options there. And so, you know, that we can actually still deal with anonymous reviews. So I think this sort of takes us to the end of our presentation, and we're going to open shortly with some questions. So I guess just in summary, you know, starting with non-legal options and commercial options for trying to resolve and deal with negative reviews is our first, you know, recommendation to all our clients. It's not expensive. It's something that businesses can do themselves. You know, the second step is, if they want to sort of, I guess, up the ante, is issue a concerns notice. They might want to get some legal advice about what actually needs to go into that letter. And then the third step is, you know, considering commencing legal proceedings. The process is the same whether or not it's a claim in defamation or injurious falsehood. And again, there's definitely options for dealing with online and anonymous reviews. So I think that that's a summary of everything that we've managed to talk about. I can't believe we got that done in 30 minutes.
No, well done to us. Right on time. And now we'd really like to answer some of your questions. I'm just having a look. We've actually got quite a few, Rebecca. So did we want to start with some of the questions that got submitted earlier in relation to the Google Play Store, Apple App Store? Someone asked about Glassdoor employee, Airbnb and Booking.com, for example. Can these be removed by taking legal action as well? In, you know, the same process essentially for these platforms.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you might want to think twice about just commencing proceedings against Google straight off the bat. So, you know, it's firstly investigating whether or not these platforms actually have a complaints mechanism. So just before we, you know, launched into this webinar, I did have a look in the Google Play Store and Apple App Store, and I believe that there actually is a mechanism which you can actually identify particular reviews as being false and request deletion. You know, again, if those reviews will not be deleted, then it's the next step. Can we identify who made those reviews and engage with them directly? You know, going through those steps that we've already outlined. Write to Google or Apple. Set out the basis of why you say that claim is false and negative, and then, yeah, potentially commence proceedings. But again, commencing proceedings needs to be weighed against, the costs of actually taking that action. So it needs to be, you really need to consider the extent to which a particular review has damaged your reputation. So is it a negative review that's, it's not great, but perhaps can be balanced against, a positive response and other positive reviews, or is it something that's very damaging to your business? That's the key thing to consider whether or not you want to actually take legal action.
Yeah, exactly. This is a good question, not related to defamation, but how about those businesses that buy great reviews and as a competitor or consumer, you have evidence that they have done this? What reporting mechanisms do you have to keep the industry fair? So I think that would be the ACCC.
Yeah, that's right. So that's a really good question. So, similar to the fact that, a business shouldn't be deleting all negative reviews, on the flip side, I don't think that they should be buying positive reviews at the same time. So the ACCC is the regulator that looks after businesses and makes sure that businesses don't engage in misleading and deceptive conduct. And certainly, if those if they're purchasing reviews that are not genuine, then that's engaging in misleading and deceptive conduct. And so making a complaint to the ACCC could certainly be an option. There's plenty of information on the ACCC website about how to make a complaint, and I would just recommend engaging with the ACCC directly, providing them with the information and letting them take over that investigation process.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, more questions.
Yes. There's a question here, am I able to leave a negative yet honest and constructive review? The company is aware that I'm not happy with them, but they sent me a letter from their lawyer telling me that if I post anything that hurts their business reputation, they will start commencing legal proceedings without notice. So it does sound like that you may have been issued with a
that sounds very
notice.
specific.
Yeah. Look, generally, yes, you should be able to leave a negative yet honest and constructive review. I'm not going to comment on the particular circumstances on what you should do, but in general, as long as it's truthful and honest based on your opinion. So those matters that Silje discussed earlier as defences to claims of defamation, you should be able to leave negative reviews. And certainly the ACCC guidance is that, that companies shouldn't be removing negative reviews. So it's not that it's not permissible at all. Those reviews can't be defamatory. They can't be part of a campaign to purposely damage that business. So, as long as it's fair and reasonable based on your experience, then yes, you should be able to leave a negative review. But look, obviously depends on the content.
Unfortunately, we don't have a freedom of speech like America sort of enshrined, and maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's not, but it can be quite complicated in terms of what can you say. But I mean, if it's exactly, Rebecca, if it's honest, then you should be able to say it, essentially. So another question we have is, how do we mitigate exposure, and what are the ways forward for digitally dependent businesses with communities online? Which is an interesting question. So with communities in particular, there's a High Court case that just got brought down a judgment, Vola, which might be relevant to this, which basically said that the platform and the sort of page owners on, for example, a Facebook platform could be held liable or considered a publisher, even if they didn't actually publish the comment or review, could be held as a publisher in the context of defamation, which I find really interesting. But it creates some issues for, if you have a business where you're really dependent on an online community that you've set up on a platform, it means that you really have to be regulating that more carefully and closely, because you're responsible for the comments that are made on there, essentially, is what the High Court has said. So in terms of mitigating exposure, you definitely want to think about, do I have, the right tools to be able to be reviewing the posts and comments that are made in my online community? Definitely, and regulating that. Another question. So, how successful is the legal recourse in pursuing negative reviews? Any good examples?
Well, I think we've already talked about a few examples. Silje, is there any other case that you might want to highlight?
We've spoken about some of the court claims that recent judgments where they have been really successful in pursuing negative reviews. I find really interesting. We like to focus on real commercial, pragmatic solutions for our clients. So trying not to take it too much further than, trying to resolve it basically without spending too much money. But there are really good examples of people who have not been able to resolve it and taken it to court and won a substantial amount in damages. So yeah, there's plenty of examples, which I find really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult to comment on success rates because success can be measured quite differently, and it's it's unknown to us how many for example, concerns notices are issued and resolved informally. And I don't think that there's any particular winning formula in terms of matters that need to go to court. And generally, all matters are different, all complaints are different, all of the issues can be different from case to case. And so it's really, not looking at towards, well, what other cases have been resolved successfully. It's looking at the particular facts and circumstances of a particular claim and having a think about, with reference to case law, but what are the facts in this case? What's the damage here? Can I demonstrate that damage? Is it worth spending the time and money going to court to fight this?
Exactly. Another interesting question. What if someone posts a negative review with some facts and some falsehoods? For example, saying I bought a $5,000 product and delivery was 2 months late, but they've purchased a $500 product and delivery was late because of third-party issues.
So that's probably, that's a review that, I would suggest that would be dealt with informally by contacting that person directly. So either just giving them a call and just saying, look, I saw the review online. I can see that you're really unhappy. Explaining that the delivery was late because of third-party issues and that you had no control over. You're really sorry that was their particular experience. It's not an experience that all of your customers have had. Try and contextualize it. See if you can reach some common ground with that person. See if you can get them to remove that review, or at least maybe just correct it. Say, look, well,
Yes.
I've noticed that there's a typo in there. You spent $500. Can you just at least amend it? If they won't amend it, then correct the record. Comment on there, just say, we acknowledge it. We acknowledge that the purchase was for 500. Sorry, must have been a typo there. And unfortunately the delivery was late because of the third-party contractor and we just had no control over that situation. Really sorry that you're unhappy. It's not something that I would probably recommend, you take it too much further. I think it's just providing some context about that particular experience.
That's right. And most people, I know I do, I read those reviews and then I read, any posts or comments from the actual owner of the company or whoever who provides that extra context. And, everyone knows there's two sides to the story. So I think it's really effective to comment on the reviews and then people get a real sense of, the fact that there's not just one story here. Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. Let's see.
We've got a question here. How do we deal with competitors and their agents and representatives leaving negative reviews maliciously. I think this is something that we can cover quickly. Look, we sort of discussed it. It's an injurious falsehood claim. So step one would be trying to identify the people who are making these posts, trying to find some evidence that they're related to a competitor, and you know, writing to them directly, finding out who's behind it, writing to the competitor if you can actually demonstrate that these people are making reviews based on their instructions. And yeah, like issuing a concerns notice that you think that you've got a valid a claim for injurious falsehood. So I think that it's definitely still engaging with the steps that we've recommended, but there's certainly action that can be taken there. Look, I think that's all we've got time for. I'm sorry that we couldn't answer all of the excellent questions.
There's so many good questions.
Yeah, we hope that you found it useful. And look, hand over to you, Silje, to wrap things up.
Thanks so much for sticking around and listening to us talk about defamation and injurious falsehood. We really hope it was helpful. We just wanted to mention this special offer, which is just for you who have actually been on the webinar, and give you a bit of background to LegalVision and what the sort of services we can offer. We're actually got a really good, unique service, which is called LVConnect Pro. It's a membership, and it's essentially this all-you-can-eat legal advice service. So there's all this information on the slide about what it includes, but essentially unlimited legal advice consults, unlimited document drafting and reviews, and other sort of things that would be really relevant to your business. So essentially, anyone who has watched this webinar, you're eligible to receive a complimentary consultation to discuss how LVConnect Pro can help your business respond to negative online reviews. And you can redeem this special offer. So to do that, there is some instructions on this slide, but essentially there'll be a survey that will appear after this webinar. And if you just click yes in the survey and leave your contact information, and then or reply at legalvision.com.au, mention that you watched the webinar, you'll be able to get access to that. Great, and I think that's it. Thanks so much, everyone. Really, really great.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.